So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Motion made by Cynthia and seconded by Glenn to add to the agenda a possible acquisition for fire equipment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, point of order, just
Yes.
if we're going to be taking action, it really should be 48 hours notice. I know we can amend our agendas, but usually not with actionable items.
Okay. All right, so the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of our last meeting.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Cynthia and seconded by Jamie to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are at the top part of the agenda where we open it up for public comments, and I would ask anyone that's either present or on the Zoom call that would like to speak on any subject that's not already on the agenda, please weigh in now and just identify yourself for the record.
Hi Dan, Joe Jervis.
Hi, Joe.
I read last month's minutes on the tax rate. I was very disappointed with that. Oops, our bad, we made a mistake. We'll try not to increase too bad next month. My calculations show that the town rate was off 134-fold. Glenn, you've got a business. If you bid $3,000 for a customer, poured the foundation, then came back and said, oops, sorry, it was $400,000. How would that work? I mean, that's effectively what happened with the tax rate, is the town approved a 0.3% increase in the town general budget, and we saw a 40% increase in our tax bills. And oops, our bad, we did something wrong with the grand list, and we'll try and do better next year. It would have been nice if there was a letter from the select board in the tax bills explaining what had happened and how we got to this point. Mistakes happen. I'm not crucifying the mistake, but you know, the magnitude of the mistake with absolutely no explanation to the public, just oops, there were mistakes, and we'll try not to raise it next time. You know, the townspeople are already getting hit with a bunch of new taxes out of the state. We're soon to be hit with this clean meat tax. They're calling it credits, but it's a tax. And to see the town be that far off from what we approved back in March is just appalling. I don't know if the select board can provide any clarity, but I was very concerned with what I saw, and I'm sure there's others that are on fixed incomes that, you know, it's going to be a big shock to see that magnitude of increase.
Do you want to address that, Nick, or?
I think the answer, I tried to explain it reasonably well in the minutes, and I can certainly clarify with you on the specifics of numbers. I think the numbers are less than what you're saying, but the numbers are still substantial enough for me to, as soon as this error in the 21 budget came to light, we took action decisively, and certainly we know that we can say that a proposed rate increase next year is effectively impossible. There is no viable way that this government can get to a point where it would increase spending to the point to offset the negative cash on hand we went into this year that put upward pressure on the rates. I'm happy to explain this in extreme detail as I've gone through with other taxpayers who brought this up, but certainly we know that this was a cascading failure, and certainly yes, there's responsibility with the select board, with my office, with the treasurer's office, and with all the people who looked over all these numbers. But certainly it was masked by a highly variable cash on hand story associated with previous surpluses and things like that. But I'm happy to go into further detail, but certainly no one in this government should feel happy or feel confident in what happened. But do we know that the errors that were associated with this rate will never, ever, ever happen again because it was related to such a cascading back in history, fluky large surplus in a previous year that masked a missed rate increase that should have gone up more last year than it did this year. And it is effectively sandwiching 2 years rate increases into one, alongside making up for a strange cash on hand associated with the peak COVID shutdowns where we weren't spending much money at all. Especially doing this and having this rate increase coming from a year where we were under budget in every one of our departments. And then we walked into this year with negative cash on hand because we were not able to tax and then return it this year. So this should have been a year where we had substantial cash on hand being returned to taxpayers. The rates should have been higher than in the last year, and that's how we got here. But I'm happy to explain this in detail with you. But we certainly know that responsibility with this falls on more or less every member of this government who was involved in that 21 rate.
Just to clarify, Joe, the budget rate that was approved in March, that budget number hasn't changed. There's 3 components that comprise the tax system: the tax rate, the budget, and the grand list. And we had a reappraisal last year, and the grand list, as you know, by state statute, when we hit the 85 or 84 percentile, we're mandated to reappraise. We reappraised last year, and to our sheer astonishment, the appraisal came in at a rate that we're gonna have to reappraise again this year,
Well, no.
or this coming year.
Well, no, we won't because they changed the law. But importantly, the gist of this is that we had a reappraisal last year. Our grand list did not meaningfully change. It changed less than $1 million. You look at the Manchester grand list, and it went up 40% year on year. So this is a story where
has to do with 3 components.
Yeah.
One is the grand list, and that's a big part.
I think the biggest culprit here, at least relative to ours, and I can say this and I'm making public record, the fact that I just had my house reappraised. And that number is in line with the numbers you're seeing in other towns. I can't explain why our reappraisal didn't yield the same results every other town in our area that reappraised that year got, but certainly we are not happy with that reappraisal. The reappraisal should have put us to a common level of appraisal at 100% approximately. We had a reappraisal and we still came in in the 86th percentile. We were well
1%
underappraised despite a
above
brand new reappraisal. Coming back with a $319 million grand list before and after a reappraisal in this environment should have astounded all of us. But there was no way around it to challenge it as a whole. Something it was not clicking here, and it may be that the comps were all bad because of the low volume, but whatever excuse an assessor may give you, there is a real substantial component associated with that assessment number that somehow is way out of line with everyone else in our region. Like I spit out my drink when I saw the Manchester number.
So what
Yeah,
does it
so I
mean
think-
going forward
wait.
a year from now?
Can I have a comment? So I think that one of the important things here is this question of this number that the state uses, which Nick has referred to 85%. What is that called? It's not the
Common level
coefficient of
appraisal.
common level appraisal. So they adjust things based on how well they think your appraisal did. And ours didn't do well, even though we just did it and it should have been good. So we got penalized for having a weird appraisal. And that's one of the factors in what happened with the tax rate. And that is not under our control because we got an appraisal, we thought it was going to be good, and the state said it's not good enough. You didn't keep up. So that was one of the factors. The other mistakes are extremely unfortunate, and we're going to make sure they don't happen again in that way. But I also feel as if this has been a very challenging series of budget years with the pandemic and different changes, waves of different sources of funding and extra expenses. We've been trying to do a lot of catch up with our equipment. We bought a lot of equipment for the park. We bought equipment for the highways. and these were necessary expenses. But I have been feeling that we were going too far too fast, and I am not gonna be supporting more purchases unless they're emergencies, or the fire department and things like that. I personally would like to be, I've always thought this was the way to go, to have the tax rate stay fixed and to have the necessary growth in the budget covered by the growth in the grand list. Now your absolute dollars will still go up because your house becomes more valuable, but I think that's what we should be aiming for. And I feel we may have gotten a little bit too partly because we didn't actually have the right numbers. We may have gotten a little bit into, we need this, we need this, we need this. And I think we have to rein that in and really be aiming for work, trying to have the tax rate fixed. And there are things out of our control, okay, but that's what we need to be aiming for. And I don't think that I don't think we've been aiming for that as strongly as I think we should.
There's a lot of factors that put major downward pressure on next year's rate that should make it so this is where this level of spending is close to where our modernized government, stable, keep everything up to date and not let everything fall apart level of government should about be. There are options that there are little things that we can cut, but ultimately we have components that have risen in cost that we do need to keep the quantities that we were buying fixed up. Gravels, winter sand, trucking
And that's
for
an important
things,
consideration because the
fuel.
inflation rate, everything that we buy has gone up in cost. And that's the other thing, along with this, the common level of appraisal, the inflation rate has hit everybody, which just makes the tax increase harder for everybody. But that's something that's not under our control.
We need to keep investing in a requisite amount of money to make sure everything stays upright and everything stays in a state of good repair. We had some undertaxing in the past, which left a lot of the equipment in a state of bad repair. I called it at town meeting the dumping ground of the county because we were buying used equipment that was in its last 10% of useful life and then fighting with it and pouring man hours into that and not getting the work that we needed out of it. But ultimately, we certainly know that we've done those purchases. We've gotten some of the park equipment that we've needed to buy and things like that. We've gotten the highway equipment back to a state of good repair where we're not fighting every day with batteries. But are we at a point where we need to be doing choice projects in the next budget year? Not really. We're in a year where we're starting to spend down our ARPA dollars in a substantial way that should be offsetting some costs. And we still have lots of grant money that has offset a number of other costs. So we're getting a lot of value for money we're investing. But ultimately, the concerns about the tax rate are real, the concerns about the size of government are real, but ultimately we're getting to a point where the growth in government as a whole should be petering out, where there aren't a whole lot of new things that we need to do. There aren't people that we need to add necessarily. There aren't new expenses that are very expensive expenses. It's a lot of keeping up with change in cost on a low level, but I would love to break this budget back down and rebuild it in a way that's just as sustainable as this. And there are projects that we'll be able to put on the back burner. For instance, work on this building, which will be offset by state dollars in the next 2 years, is going to be a big part of that. We're not going to be really spending anything on projects at Town Hall. The state's paying for it, more or less 100%. So we can say that if there is a project, typically it's going to be done paired with a funding source. So the stuff that you're paying for with your grand list and with your property taxes are operations, savings for those equipment before it wears out, and other things associated with keeping us upright and the bonus stuff is bonus.
To Cynthia's point about the purchases for the most part come out of sinking funds, not out of, and that's capital that we built up over the years, not out
Need a new
of
truck, save
operational
money,
funds. We
buy it when you get the
don't overspend the operating budget to buy that stuff. It was all stuff that we already had the money for. So
We took a more or less unprecedented step with the grader because we needed to keep that grader moving for keeping the roads in a state of good repair. And the previous grader really was 30-something years old. It was like bought in 1993. So certainly, that was the only place where we resorted to a lease purchase. We really do try to pay for everything with savings.
But I also think the idea of the possibility of a letter of explanation, I think that's an interesting idea.
I think that's a good.
And I think that going forward,
critique.
we might think about whether that's a good idea, even if it's a very ordinary, not an extraordinary. So I think that's a very good idea.
Absolutely.
So you stated that you're gonna do everything you can so that this doesn't happen again next year. So what is everything you can?
That means, one, the error was an error where an individual, well, I think we tracked it to an individual doing a manual calculation. Manual calculations associated with the tax rate are not something that should be happening. So that is something that this isn't,
How
and
is there not any oversight for it?
it was done and reviewed by a number of people, but it was still an increase, and it looked like, but it should have been an increase. But certainly, yes, this was a cascading failure at a time when staff certainly all made failures in oversight and simply took an initial number after some review at its word and didn't think about it conceptually. This is something that, having been through this episode, we will simply be pouring more time into this and recalculating this as appropriate, making sure that there isn't only one person on the staff who truly knows how this tax rate is calculated.
And also, I think getting outside eyes on it, if we have to
Yes.
get someone from VLCT or an auditor or somebody else to make sure that we're taking the right number and that we're manipulating it correctly, and that it isn't just something that becomes a basis that is shaky.
I like that in as much as the only person in this administration that really didn't have their eyes on this was our town auditor. We have a town auditor we're paying them. I think that's something that we can commit, that's something we can put to, to be reviewed by our town auditor, who is a highly competent, retired CPA, who certainly knows what she's doing. So that's something that we can certainly show. It's going through the eyes of our auditor. And that wasn't practiced in the past because we had elected auditors who were really doing a small set of monthly tasks. They didn't oversee this side of the government in any meaningful way. That's something that's...
And there's, I mean, it looks like it's pretty straightforward. You have this money, you're spending this, you subtract this, and then this is what you have to raise and blah, blah, blah. But there are possibilities of errors at each of those stages. You're not taking the right version, the latest version, the correct version of that number. And I think, as Nick referred to, the question of the cash on hand, the delinquent taxes, things like that, that just were not as firm as they should be. And just speaking for myself, I'm going to ask to see those numbers and see every step of the way and the transformation, so that we're confident.
I think the goal is to not be setting this as close to the deadline, and one of the things that does play into that is making sure the grand list is in on time and not asking for extensions like we've had the last couple of years. That has pushed the rate setting to the end of the rate setting window. And that is one thing that the board hopes to talk about at budget season, that we want to find money to reallocate from one place to another place to support the lister's office in making sure the grand list is in time, so that when we are setting the tax rate,
we're not in a rush.
Right. That's a good way to...
Haste makes waste.
Yes.
So when did you first know how drastically this was gonna affect the tax rate? When was the first?
When the tax rate was presented, which was right before the deadline, frankly. So it
was very
the grand list was in very late, and that pushed the tax rate to be being set very late. But ultimately, this was an error associated with the 21 grand list,
right,
which was also in.
The error started like last year.
It was in the 22 grand list that that ultimately precipitated this. So, and that is when the error was made. It was made with the 22 tax rate and the grand and the timeline coming from a very late grand list over the summer of 22. So, yes, this has been a jarring experience for the government as a whole. Every member has taken this wholly to heart, knowing that this is something that taxpayers should fully understand is a problem. but it certainly was not in a position where we were going to be able to warn people with any meaningful of further ability to prepare, unfortunately. But
I think it would be good to put as part of one of the job expectations for the listers, for the treasurer, for the others involved, that we have the grand list, that we have the tax rate by a date certain, so that it isn't coming up, so that we have time to do the due diligence
I
to
think
figure it out.
if the lister's office wants to get an extension on the grand list, it should be appealing to the select board and coming to a hearing to explain itself. And it should not be a box checking exercise for the extension of the grand list for this board.
So I think they need to operate so that they're not gonna have to
Right,
ask for an extension.
and that is why we certainly we'll be talking about getting some support into that office to make sure an office that is currently in a place where it needs some support and to take the relevant efforts to keep the office running as appropriate.
One thing I noticed, if you really feel like there should have been a letter that was sent, it's fine to say, we'll do it in the future, but maybe you should consider putting one out before people
Now.
have to pay their taxes. I think that's a very fair thing, and that will help people who might get upset to realize, hey, there's been a mistake and we're trying to correct it, and it didn't affect your tax rate.
I think that can fall to the treasurer's office, but and ultimately should be.
Well, the select board can send out a letter itself. We don't rely on the treasurer to send it out.
Yeah.
Which is, I thought we had briefly discussed that when we were chatting about this, that a letter needed to go out to explain any mistakes, but.
I think you'll have much more of you'll have a better reaction if people have an explanation. Always.
Okay, is any other questions or comments about the tax rate or?
My only question would be, when do you think you would get that letter out to the citizens of this town?
I will work on it when I can, hopefully later this week, I guess, and
I'd like to see a draft ready to go for the next meeting if we can do it.
For the next meeting?
Yeah.
A month from now?
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's,
Or sooner.
if the select board's sending it,
We need to be sure that it's correct, okay? So the explanation, so we need to vet it before we send it out, and that takes a little time.
I understand the sooner the better,
Yeah, everybody should.
even for me. Yeah, the sooner the better, and the more of a heads up they have, the sooner they can kind of prepare. And I just know I'm gonna have to add to my escrow. So, simple, but that's times everybody. Is there any other public comments, either on the call or in the room? Going, gone?
One quick
Yes,
question,
go ahead.
hopefully non-controversial.
Before the gone.
Last meeting on the 24th on the new land use bylaws, there was a statement made that it was on the website. I went looking and the draft is not on the website.
it is under the latest, but it's back in there from having been posted. But it is posted on the website, and certainly, it's definitely there. I've had people access it. But yeah, we probably should have made it a more prominent place.
Probably.
I think that's certainly a lesson that we'll go into and with future bylaws, but
So it's there, I just wasn't smart enough.
it was there, it's definitely there, and, no,
I wouldn't go that far.
our website leaves enough to be desired that I think there's a broader redesign that needs to be brought in to make these kind of temporary postings to make them more prominent in a way that's helpful.
It's there, you didn't find it, Joe, was a complete answer. It's like,
There you go.
All right, I guess other than that, there's no other public comments. So we're on to new business, which is the zoning bylaw. And I believe we have a couple of the representatives from the planning commission here that can answer questions, I hope, or
I'm gonna run through a quick explanation.
he's got a PowerPoint he's gonna run through, and then we'll do the after that.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. So. Okay, so we have reached the conclusion of municipal planning grant zoning bylaw revision. This is a quick summary of how we got here. The board made a decision in 2021 that we should seek funding to get this this matter resolved, or get this bylaw rewritten, acknowledging the problems in the general housing crisis, and we went with a flexible municipal planning grant as opposed to another grant program. We were awarded in 21. BCRC was generally involved with this project from the very beginning, and then eventually, due to BCRC staff transitions, they got thrown off. That we got an extension. I ended up running it to the end. That gave us an opportunity to bring in the S100 Homes Act compliance. But importantly, where we got is that we got to the most complete zoning rewrite in 50 years. Zoning turned 50 2 weeks ago, and this is a bylaw. Previously, our bylaw looked a lot like that 1973 version in structure. It was just bolted onto. And now, this is the final meeting to bring this matter to completion. It's been warned in accordance with the relevant state sections of the newspaper and the whatnot. And it will be live in 21 days after a vote.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you look at just the table of contents and look at the zoning permit application flow chart, you realize this isn't our parents' bylaws anymore. This is really reorganized. It's very clear. You can go through just looking at the table of contents to figure out where you need to look for whatever you're interested in. We've added 2 charts that allow you to very specifically look for the type of permit that you're looking for and figure out, there it is right there, and figure out what's allowed, what's not allowed. I think this is a way easier document, or will be a way easier document for us in the Planning Commission to use than anything we've ever had. I think will be same for the ZBA, same for the town of Tennant, basically.
And that's exactly the summary. It's that this is an ease of use was number one, and then all the other pieces were secondary. We wanted to make sure that this is a modern bylaw that has explanations for what everything is, and where you can do it and how you do it, and that things are in singular places. There's some minor density increases, a lot of that associated with compliance with S100. And then the flood rules were improved, clarified. We have some graphics, and then we brought the performance standards all into one place. That's all back to the ease of use. We have home-based business, customary home occupations, wholly rewritten, and they also incorporated the sign ordinance into this because it's run by the same people. So I'll be seeking a repeal of the sign ordinance after an adoption of the zoning ordinance. So that's it. I just wanted to make sure that you guys had at least an overview of what this bylaw is, and certainly the process that it took to get there. That has been 15 months of public meetings and twice a month for 2 or more hours in many cases. It is, we've gotten to a really good product that has gotten a lot of decision from the committee on what is to be and is not to be regulated and how. So yeah.
Could I just ask, you gentlemen, my understanding from reviewing the materials is that there aren't really big substantive changes in how things are regulated or the zone. There's changes on the edges to bring it into compliance with current law or current practices, but the whole flow chart, those charts so that you don't have to look between 5 different zones to figure out what's really going on, that the ease of use and the reconciliation, because there were so many places that almost seemed contradictory. You had to go here, you had to go here. The flood zone stuff was so complicated. So it seems to me that what you have done is made this a version of essentially the same zoning bylaws with some modifications and tweaks, but essentially the same, but made it so much easier for the public to use, so much easier for the land use administrator to use, and so much easier for the ZBA and the APC to use, because new members come on to those bodies. You don't necessarily know the whole zoning book when you come on. So I just feel as if it's gonna make things easier and better for everybody. That's what I see. Is there anything that I am missing or that you think you wanna call people's attention to? Or does that really get to where we are?
Not particularly. The only thing, revolutionary about it would just be the fact that it's in a good order. And if I started on the planning commission in 2016 and became the chairman a year ago. And the first bylaws that I read through were very confusing.
Yeah.
And rife is really not the word, but there were contradictions in it. And one of the benefits, I think, of having had the time we did is we sort of were able to go through and make sure that those contradictions are no longer part of it. I think the document probably helps a little toward, having some low-income housing, some allowing people to build on slightly smaller lots, particularly in the village center, which is where the state of Vermont is really pushing us to build to begin with at the moment. And I'm trying to think what else. I think, we had an interest also in making sure that the floodway is protected. Another thing that maybe, there are some changes there. But no, I can't really think of anything. There's nothing radical in this, except for the structure.
It is really tinkering at the edges but there is one important thing for housing, which is the state law mandates a minimum that says you can have owner occupancy requirements for accessory dwelling units. This bylaw removes that. And that is one important thing for allowing housing among people who are part-time residents and things like that, to open up these opportunities to add accessory units that are typically going to be in small buildings in your town centers or things like that. And that's something that we can say, we did something substantial for housing. That's a well understood thing that the state allows as a choice among towns. That if you really are pro housing, want to address the housing crisis, that this is one of the things that you're definitely doing. So I think we can say we definitely did something meaningful to address the housing crisis here. But without it being radical, like say changing the rural zone to allow something, smaller lots or less frontage or something, things like that.
But Nick, you did something permissive. You said you can have accessory dwelling units even if you're not present, you're not living on the property. That is allowing it. That doesn't necessarily mean it will happen. That doesn't necessarily mean it would be rented long-term or anything like that. So you did something permissive. We have not done anything to create more affordable housing. Let's just be clear about that.
100%.
But we did something that would make more housing units possible.
Correct.
So, but just, and that in itself is a big step, but let's be realistic about, we did not make progress on something because we just changed it to allow it. It hasn't happened.
We changed the Jello mold, as we may say, in this case, but that doesn't mean people are going to fill it. But certainly we did what we can. At least we've adjusted it to make it so there's more opportunity.
There's more flexibility.
And more flexibility.
No, and that's good, and I'm not denigrating. It's really good. We just don't want to overstate any kind of steps that have been taken because we haven't created any new housing.
I hope we do that.
Yeah.
I mean, long term.
I hope it will.
Yeah.
I think it will, but it's going to be gradual, one by one.
If the incentives work the way we think they will, that will happen over time.
I don't think there's any way to control whether they're just rented on Airbnb, so,
That's true.
So we'll need a motion to approve this once the discussion is concluded.
How
Ask
should
a
we?
question.
Yes.
There's a lot of desire to make more housing available. The state seems focused on our 15-minute villages and put everything in the village core and increase the density. As I drive through Arlington, I notice a lot of abandoned properties. You know, they're still on the grand list, taxes apparently are still getting paid, but they're not occupied. Is there anything that the zoning bylaws help, or anything that the select board's looking at that can help encourage taking units that are already there, that already have septic, which is one of the barriers to accessory dwelling units, and put these back on the market, and maybe even improve our grand list because, you know, the properties have been improved and are not, you know, deteriorated to the point where, you know, the roofs are leaking and they're just rotting away.
I totally share your frustration. I don't see any role for the town in doing that. There has to be someone who wants to buy them and restore them, and there have to be willing sellers, and it's my understanding in some of those situations, the owners are not willing to sell despite the condition of the
We have
properties.
talked about several of these properties.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Very, very frustrating.
But what we can do is, and what this bylaw does do, is it gives a little bit more flexibility. So at the margin, there's some incentive to either rehabilitate these and in an adjusted way. We've added and made more finely grained the permissions for businesses. So there's going to be more opportunity to do that live work type of reinvigoration of some of these properties that might be being bought by someone who wants to use the property in a couple of different ways. And I think that's something that you've really shown that having interacted with you, and one of the things we wanted to do as part of this bylaw was make sure that you have the opportunity to have mixed and multiple uses, so that what makes something, so that someone can get the recipe right to bringing a property back to life. And it may be some of this live work story, and it may be some using things more intensely. The S100 mandated dwelling units per acre rules are important. The minimum parking requirements rules. Some of these properties may not be able to be brought back on because of inability to add the parking spaces that were necessary. So that is something that did change, and that's going to be an opportunity that some of these properties that you wouldn't have been able to use as you may have thought now have some of those new permissions that might make someone have the incentive to actually bring them back to life or give them some new life.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? I will entertain a motion to approve the zoning bylaw final draft.
I would like to make a motion to approve the Town of Arlington Land Use and Development bylaws as amended by the Town of Arlington Select Board, September 11th, 2023. Is that good, Nick?
As presented by the Arlington Select Board, not amended.
Well, it says amended right here. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
great. Okay, as presented to the Town of Arlington Select Board, September 11th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Cynthia and seconded by Todd to approve the zoning bylaw updates and as of September 11th, 2023, as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So the next item will be, just as Nick said, to repeal the sign ordinance so that then that falls into this.
I will grab the date on that sign ordinance. One moment. The sign ordinance as dated October 18th, 1973.
I make a motion to repeal the existing sign ordinance as dated October 18th, 1973.
Second.
Motion made by Cynthia and seconded by Jamie to repeal the sign ordinance that was dated October 18th of 1973. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. So the next item under new business is the appointment of Jonathan Murray to the Planning Commission.
Mr. Murray's here.
Okay.
He came and made some really good comments at the planning commission meeting on the bylaw, so we thought he'd be a great candidate.
Could you just give us a nutshell summary of your experience and time in town and
Interest.
what your interest is of the process?
So I grew up in Castleton, Bomazine area. Lived up there until COVID. Had a sporting goods store, apartment complex, a couple other things with some business partners. Also worked at GE as an engineer. Unfortunately, when COVID happened, I lost everything. Restarted from scratch. Now I work at Mass. I bought a house down here 2 years ago. Be 2 years this November. Deployed last year with the Air National Guard, so I lost all summer. Then I got two non-combat line of duty injuries, so then I lost all winter through rehab and whatnot. So then lost all this winter or this summer from the rain. So looking forward to when I can eventually actually work on my house. But yeah, I got into at least understanding that what's going on with the zoning bylaws and how that affects up in Bomazine, because we had a small business that had a conditional use permit and we regularly went to zoning board meetings and whatnot. And so yeah, and then when I saw the sign out front last month for the zoning bylaws, came in, read them, talked to Nick, and then went to the meeting and mentioned there was an opening, and yeah.
Here you are.
Yeah, pretty much.
Excellent, the sign worked.
Kat Bryers, who actually worked on the bylaw, happened to be here and had a great conversation with us as well. So I want to thank her for being part of this conversation. But
I will entertain the motion for the appointment.
Could I just ask, what is the term of this appointment? Will be it until next April?
let me
I believe so.
double. Yes, it will be until next April. And
Next
then
April, and then reappointment,
Because they're, what are they, 2-year terms or what?
it's 2 or 3 year term.
Yeah.
depending
so-
on which seat he's taking,
Yeah,
but for
So it'll be
initial
the-
appointments,
it's-
it's just to finish.
right,
this
so
term.
it's just because we do the appointments in April, so you're gonna be appointed until April, and then you would be appointed to a regular term. So it's not a probationary period or nothing against you, but we, that's just the way the system works.
It is a term vacated by John Williams, which is will be a 3-year term that will,
Yeah.
well,
So-
it will be the final 2 years of this 3-year term.
Okay.
So,
But the purpose of
Or it'll be
this
brief.
is to keep the terms separated, so there's not
yeah.
wholesale turnover on the board.
Right, and also so that people's terms aren't expiring, some in August, some in this, some in that.
Right.
You know,
All
that it's
over the
all
place.
based on, so that's why we just appointed.
We
it.
go April to April, depending on what year and length of term.
Nick, is he replacing John?
Yes, that's the seat that John
Thank you.
was in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
One job to another.
Don't even have to change the name and seat.
there we go.
So I will entertain a motion for the appointment.
I make a motion to appoint Jonathan Murray to the vacant seat on the planning commission.
Correct.
Second.
Motion made by Cynthia and seconded by Todd to appoint Jonathan Murray to the vacancy on the planning commission to serve through April and then go from there. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome aboard.
First meeting in a couple of Thursdays.
You haven't told him it's a lifetime appointment, right?
Yeah.
We'll get you a copy of the new bylaw as printed, so you'll be the first person only working with the new bylaw.
And you're lucky.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Nope.
Definitely lucky.
Very good.
Okay.
All right, we have 5.4 is the appointment or reappointment of the forest fire warden, who happens to be sitting to my left.
I'd like to just thank everybody.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks for all the work.
You were welcome.
Very good work.
Thank you.
So the letter here, Town Forest Fire Warden has expired as of June 30th of '23. This is Lars Lund, the district fire supervisor. He recommends the current fire warden, Jamie Poston, be reappointed. The appointments are run for 5 years, so that June 23 appointment is the end of a 5-year term.
It is.
So, unless you do not want to accept it, I see no reason not to reappoint.
So do we appoint or do we recommend to him?
Actually, we are recommending to him, we sign this, and he signs it, we sign it, and then I believe then the state.
Makes it official.
They make it official.
Do we all need to sign it or just you?
All of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I make a motion to approve the reappointment of Forest Fire Warden Jamie Posture.
Second.
Motion made by Cynthia and seconded by Todd to reappoint Jamie as Town Forest Fire Warden for a term to go from July 1st of 2023 to June 30th, 2028. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll just pass it around and then you have to sign up here, Jamie?
Yep.
And then you can sign or not sign.
Can you sign on the bottom or?
I'm not gonna sign.
That's what I
Select
thought.
I would
think it's better
recuse
not to.
yourself if.
You'll have, we have nothing, you know.
Abstain from the vote.
You only need 3 votes and you got 4, so.
Did we vote?
Oh, I gotta sign the other one too.
Yes,
We did vote.
yes.
And then whoever signs last, just date it. I think you also sign here. And
I'm gonna open it and go again.
Go ahead.
A little stuff.
yeah,
Maybe the motorcycles have come now.
I hope so.
I don't know what that was.
Nick, I think it would be appropriate to deal with before we go to the ARPA meeting,
Yes,
we'll dovetail into it, but let's deal with.
let's do all the older
fire-
business and, yeah,
The new agenda item, fire equipment purchase.
yeah.
And so our fire chief is here in the back. You had to
It's gone.
say
It's
it.
gone now, it's gone.
He's long gone. He'll be back. We know it's not you.
That's why Dylan wasn't here.
Who'd you hire?
Buzzing the select
I
board.
don't know anything about it, right? So, Mike, you went out and got a couple of things for purchase requests, and I'm just gonna turn the floor over to you, let you explain them and your thinking behind them, so that we added the items to the agenda tonight. Yep, we added the items to the agenda tonight. But we'll have to act on them next week because an agenda item that is added for a purchase has to have a 48 hour.
Legally, it does not, but it certainly is prudent of the board to be fully warned. Everyone is informed that this is happening.
Yeah.
Is part of our postings
So
item.
my thinking is we should probably do a special meeting just to make that purchase this week, so we're not delaying it any further. It's gonna be out there far enough as it is.
We can legally do it, Dan, I just did a point of order that
Okay.
any actions should be.
Should be 48 hours.
Yes, in the future, we certainly
Just-
should not be doing
Just
this
because of supply
without.
chain.
Yep.
It's gonna be 6 months before we get it anyway, so why delay it 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And we also had a bit of a gap I mean, I think
Yeah,
it's
we better
been
break
3
it out.
weeks, you know, so.
So Mike, why don't you go ahead and just summarize there's 2 quotes there for 2 different things. Turnout gear, and there's 2 sets.
Those are both turnout gear.
They're
Yeah.
both turnout gear, but they're top and bottom, and they're comparables. But there's some purchasing incentives, and Mike's gonna explain all of that.
Well, as far as the turnout gear, there's no purchasing.
That's
It's on the
Pass.
tanks.
That's on the air pass.
CBA tanks.
So what you have there, you have a quote from MES, which is called Morning Pride turnout gear. The salesman brought down a set, showed us the differences. He said he was probably gonna be more expensive than Glow, but he's actually cheaper. Better knees, more used, better seams. One of the things that I learned that nobody's ever really explained to us, for interior firefighting, there's different steps of liners. To match up to what we have already, I pulled my set of turnout gear out, and he looked at me and he says, "You have the worst liner there is." So we pulled out Eric Marco's gear, which was the most recent purchase that we've done of turnout gear. He has the best liner there is.
You mean the thermal liner?
The thermal liners, correct. There are higher grade ones too with vents and stuff in them, but now you're just talking, the more you customize it, the more the price just shoots up. So I was there, 2 captains, one of the assistant chiefs, and a couple firemen. And with the demo of the Morning Pride gear, we like that a lot better than the Globe that we've been using.
Which is the lower of the 2 quotes?
No, actually, the Morning Pride, if you put the numbers of bunker pants, coat, boots, helmet, gloves all together,
Okay.
they're fairly comparable, but I believe Morning Pride is a little bit cheaper. The boots themselves are almost 50% cheaper.
I don't see the boots on the Morning Pride, are they included with the pants?
No, that's just another quote I have at home. But the biggest expense for the turnout gear is the coats and the pants.
So these quotes are just for coats and pants.
These are just for coats and
These are
pants.
just coats and pants.
Yep. To outfit a fireman in a complete brand new set of turnout gear with extrication gloves, firefighting gloves, new helmet, Nomex hood, bunker pants, bunker coat, and everything he needs just to be protected, you're in the area of $4,800 a piece.
Just the difference between these is approximately $125 roughly.
Yep.
But you're recommending the Morning?
The Morning Pride had, one of the things that we learned, our coats we have now, the seams are down here like they are on your t-shirt. Morning Pride seams are up here. So when you raise your hands, with our Bergeron coats, your coat comes up. With the seam up here, the coat comes up very little.
Oh, interesting.
It has bigger flaps on the pockets, so if you're wearing your interior gloves, you can get in your pockets easier. I did go with a higher grade liner for the interior firemen. Actually, everyone's gonna have a higher grade liner because it wicks away, it's how it wicks away sweat, it's the thermal lining itself and the ventilation inside the coat. The one that I have now, not necessarily everybody has now, doesn't do any moisture wicking. It holds the heat inside the coat. So that's why we've decided as fire officers to go with the Morning Pride this year, or this time around.
How many sets are we talking?
Well, out of the fire department budget, I can purchase 5 right now and still have some budget left. But last time we were at the meeting, we need 10 to 15 sets, but we just can't afford that this year.
And that's something that we'll dovetail into the ARPA discussion next,
Right.
and all that.
Now I have one guy that just finished firefighter 1. He's an outdated. I mean, I already got 5 guys that need 5 interior guys that
They need
need new gear
Yeah.
due to outdating or sizing. I mean, I haven't even gone through the other guys. These are just the newest firefighter 1s. A new member who's wearing 20-year-old gear or 15-year-old gear. Interior firefighting gear's got 10 years max. After 10 years, you're not supposed to wear it inside anymore.
So what are we contemplating? Are we contemplating approving of the order tonight?
For
Or
this
we wait,
one.
yes, and is it coming from the fire department equipment budget, or is it linked to ARPA?
That's part of this.
Fire equipment budget is not an ARPA purchase.
Okay, so this is fire department budget, and we have this money, we have money for this in the equipment budget?
Yes.
For 5 cents.
For 5 cents, yes.
So you're recommending the, not the MES, the Bergeron, right?
The MES is what he's recommending.
Morning Pride is MES.
Morning Pro.
Yep.
So do you want
And Morning Pride has 3-month turnaround. They said it'll be here in
to?
That's pretty good.
That's better.
Yeah.
Give or take, I mean, they can make promises,
Yeah.
but they say they have been about 3 months. The other company is 6 to 8. The boots, the price of the boots is $454 a pair.
Do you have
Global-
prices on all that, Mike?
They're at home.
You need a calculator.
I got the count. If you want 5 cents, it's $16,522.50 if you go with the ambulance.
And that's just coat pants.
Right. You got, when you add the helmets, the hoods, the gloves, the boots, you're gonna be closer to 24,000.
And that amount is in your budget for that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty in the budget. We spent down very little of the new equipment budget so
Okay.
far.
Any thoughts?
No, I mean, if this is what you guys are looking for, I mean, we've been with Bergeron for 25 years.
All the knee pads are better, there's more room in the knees. The gear itself is.
I haven't tried this personally, so I can't say how it feels, but
That's what you want. I'm good with it.
Okay.
Could you give me that total figure again?
$16,522.50 if you go with the MES.
What happened to them?
that's it.
Oh, they're both up,
That's-
okay.
Yeah, they're both in.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to approve the purchase of 5 sets of turnout gear from MES, the tailcoat and the tail pant, for a total cost of $16,522.50, based on a price of $1,984 for the coat, $1,320.50 for the pants. Does that cover it?
Second.
Motion made by Cynthia and seconded by Todd to approve the purchase of turnout gear, top coat, and pants for a total of 5 sets at $16,522.50. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Are you abstaining?
No, I said that.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear you. Okay. Figured you'd say it. All right, so that order is in. The other item we're gonna discuss in the ARPA discussion, we're gonna move to now and deal with it there. But my understanding is for the ARPA, you we have to have 2 quotes. Even if one's, you're not gonna use it, or we still have to have 2 quotes.
I was told the state contract, you didn't,
Yeah.
For ARPA, it still applies, and at least to my knowledge, and what
because that's gonna be extremely hard when they're the regional salesperson.
I,
That's the thing I talked about at the last meeting.
Yeah, it's gonna be a
The stuff
tricky
is so
purchase.
regional.
it's gonna be a tricky purchase. I'm gonna look
Can't
into
cross
this
the New
and
York
see if
border.
there's a way, if the state contracts at all override these rules, but as I understand it, state contracts do not fully override federal rules on these kind of purchases. But I can make the inquiries relevant to this and see if it's something that we can make work.
We use Scott's. So another option is to get a quote from another company. But if the quote from the other company comes in cheaper, you guys say, we have to change everything.
No, nothing says you have to go
You don't have
with
to
the
take-
quote.
We don't
No,
have to
I
take
think-
a low quote. We don't have to,
We have to go with
We
what
are
makes
not
sense
bound
for
by-
us.
low quote on
Yeah.
anything.
The rule is if you have to have two comparable quotes, and usually comparable quotes is the output of what is being done. So it's similar quality stuff, even if it's different brands, different manufacturers.
I can tell you.
You can
when-
price out MSAs and Scott, but because our entire fleet is Scott, MSA may be a little cheaper, but we can still go with the Scott.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense to.
Yeah. There's refitting costs associated with these things that are going to be outside of any quote. And everyone is going to have some of their own equipment already. So it certainly is going to be pretty par for the course with this. But as I have generally been pretty clear that air packs are a great ARPA expense, and certainly something that we could seek to cooperate with the town of Sunderland on, or something like that, as part of this conversation. So certainly it's an obvious ARPA expense in part because it's very few quotes you physically need to do to spend large amounts of ARPA dollars and have a big bang for your buck that importantly benefits everyone in the entire town rather than
In the service
In the
area, not
three
even the
towns.
town.
in the three towns.
Community.
Everyone in the three towns, yes.
Yeah.
Community.
And the larger area, because of
Yeah,
mutual
broad-
aid, I mean, it's.
Yeah, the broader region. So this is it would be a very socially conscious way to spend ARPA dollars as opposed to the many other ways that we could be spending ARPA dollars. So, yeah, I think I've been outspoken enough on this is a great idea in some form or another. So,
So until I get another quote, we really can't discuss this.
Well, we can, but we still need the second quote to.
to award it.
To award
In
it.
the same way it
We
was
can
with the
discuss
air
it and have all of this out of the way
Mm-hmm.
as part of it, but you need to explain the packs, like you did to me, the lighter carbon fiber packs.
Well, they're all carbon
Increased
fiber.
capacity.
Mhm.
All of those things are important that I think you should highlight.
All right, I'll touch on that. Right now, our air packs are they're called 2216s. The bottles that we now purchase are carbon wrapped bottles. They have a 15-year life to them. After 15 years, you have to replace them. We still have old aluminum tanks that you can just keep serviced or testing and testing and testing and testing. The complaint is they're heavy compared to the new ones. So we're at this point where we have at least 6 carbon wrap bottles that we're using that need to be replaced. So we had the same MES come down. They brought us a new Scott Air Pack to look at. Long story short, he priced out 2216s and he priced out the 4500s. If we make he didn't give me a set number, like originally we were talking about 4. But he said if you were to purchase, replace all your air packs on all your trucks, which we have 16 air packs on trucks. We have 4 that are fairly new, so at the officers meeting we discussed we really only need to replace 12. So to replace 12 air packs, it's $130,000. If you purchase 12 air packs, they'll give you 50% off the cost of the bottles. So what that means is we'll get 12 new air packs and 24 brand new bottles. With the 2216s or the 4500s. Now, at this point, if you were to make such a large purchase, there's 3 stages to upgrading our air pack system. The cascade system on the truck has already been upgraded to a 6,000 PSI system. The next 2 steps to doing this would be an air compressor at the firehouse or the SCBAs. So if you replaced all the SCBAs with the 4500s at this point, we could still utilize the 4 2216s we have, but step 2 of the upgrading to the larger air pack systems is done. The next step, there was only 1 step left, which is a cascade system in the compressor in the firehouse. If you were to make that large of a purchase, you'd be crazy not to. That's your whole next step, to up the bottles. They're lighter weight, they're smaller. The bottles are actually, when you take the air pack and the bottle together, the 4500s are a little bit cheaper than the 2216s. And that replaces our expired bottles. It gives us 24 brand new bottles. At the officers' meeting, we have 4 legal interior firefighters with the facial hair on some of the members. At the night of the officers' meeting, we had 4 legal interior firefighters. Altogether, we only have 7 or 8. So for us to purchase 16 air packs didn't really make much sense. Having the 4 on every engine, because you could go mutual aid, or one truck could be out of town, so you might have to use the air packs in Arlington. To just replace the 12 made a lot more sense than replacing the 16, if it comes to dollars and cents.
And the lighter ones also have a more capacity because they hold more pressure,
Yeah.
correct?
You know, they're 4,500 PSI, so you, depending upon how much you're huffing and
Depends on the
puffing,
firefighter. Depends on how much they.
you can last longer inside a building. And if you're getting, Jamie will know this, if
It's
you,
also a good thing and a bad thing.
right,
You do a little more work,
True.
but you wear out quicker.
right.
You may not be going in the second time.
And it's absolutely very helpful because if every air pack has 1 spare bottle, if you went into a structure fire and you go through 2 bottles, you should be done. You should not be going back in. So it'll help with that too. Because I'm guilty as well. You come out, how many bottles you use? 1. How many bottles you use? 1. Everyone does that. We gotta stop that.
How about the
Safety officer.
face piece, disconnect and reconnect?
Oh,
You were telling me about that.
the airline, our newer air packs now have what's called a buddy system. It has an adapter on the back where you can hook to your tank and help somebody get out or help somebody that's running out of air. We never bought the parts and pieces to use that. The packs that they're selling now have a valve right into your line. If you disconnect, I can go in, if Jamie's stuck underneath something or something like that, I can either take another air pack in with me and connect them up so the other air pack's just laying next to him, we never have to take his mask off. Or if it's a really emergency situation, I can walk up, connect to him, and let him breathe for a little while before I have to take my air pack. It's built into the hose. It's part of the air pack.
So let's talk about the ARPA funds and your total purchase for that. If you were gonna do your request, what would that be from them?
I have the number, the sheet in the other room.
Okay.
Well, if we went with the 4,500s and knocked it down to 12 air packs, it'd be about $130,000. If we went with 16,
Just so I'm clear, but you would then also need an upgrade for your compressor.
we could, with having the 2 spare bottles, we can still fill off our Cascade system. We can fill them all on our compressor now. We can't fill our Cascade tanks off our compressor. Our compressor at the firehouse caps off at 45. So we can fill the bottles individually off the compressor at the firehouse. But the Cascade system on the truck requires 6,000 PSI. We can't fill those, but we can have enough air in them to fill some bottles. If we could get up to 6,000 PSI, we could just fill more. So they're still totally functional in the department without the compressor system. It's just, it doesn't put our Cascade system to max capacity.
Yes.
I certainly support this purchasing concept. It continues the idea of making sure that the firefighters are completely equipped and protected in order to protect us. But Nick, could you give me a sense of what this means in the context of the ARPA? Because I don't have that in my head, how much ARPA we have, the other
That's
thing.
something I would like to know.
So,
Because I can't approve this if I don't know what that means we're not doing, you know, what's
absolutely.
left.
So, importantly, over the next year, we're going to be having a series of ARPA discussions as we wind to the conclusion of this and make sure we get everything allocated on the timeline. So, long and short, we have under current. Right now, we have $520,000 unaccounted for currently.
Not unaccounted for, not used, not
unused.
allocated.
Unallocated. Acknowledging there's some of